My name is Carroll. I did the Socialization of Gender, focusing on discrimination of women in the workplace. Socialization of gender is the procedure of learning the social expectations and attitudes attributed with one's gender. Sociologists explain that through gender socialization to cause human males and females to behave in different ways. They learn their different social roles. Sometimes gender roles lead to inequality, such as in the workplace. First, we'll focus on a brief historical perspective, focusing on these three periods. The human-based economy, which took place from the 17th century to the early 18th century. The household was the basic unit of economy, since economic production was largely based on the household, including small farms and large plantations, in which all members of the household were responsible for production. While specific tests may vary, both women and men were seen as contributing to the production of the whole. Women of the family-based economy, the labor was done by white women, was dependent on their class position and their marital status. Single women would work in other people's households doing tasks traditional for the time, such as spinning, weaving, and sewing. African American women in the family-based economy labored as slaves, though in many states African American men and women worked as free laborers, doing a variety of jobs such as skilled crafts workers, farm laborers. Women did most of the same jobs as men, but they also worked in the master's home. In the family wage economy, which began in the mid-18th century, starting in England and then eventually moving to France and eventually the U.S., the center of labor moved from the home to the factory systems. This would result in industrialization. In this economy, workers earned their livings outside of the home, and the household became dependent on wages that workers brought home. This eventually led to the dual role of women as paid laborers and as unpaid housewives. Because the worth of all women became measured by the wage they earned, the work of women in the home became devalued. Women and children worked for wages. In the factory systems, they received less pay than men and were often chosen as workers because they were cheap supply of labor. African American women worked primarily as domestic workers, and until 1940, as much as 60% of African American women labored as private domestic workers. White immigrant women began doing factory jobs in the textile and garment factories, where wages were low and working conditions were hazardous. In the family consumer economy, it's an extension of the family wage system, which developed through the 20th century. In this period, new technologies allowed for increased productivity and the mass production of group goods, created households specialized in consumption and reproduction. Women's economic productivity is even higher than it was in the past, though they are still primarily defined as consumers. During World War II, it allowed for women to get ahead in the working world. While it is widely believed that many new women worked as workers entered the workforce at this time, as many as 3/4 of women had worked for wages before. Women of color, professional women, and older women took advantage of the reduction in discrimination to get well-paying jobs. These higher-paying jobs allowed for new value to be added to the work that women did. When the war ended, women did not leave the paid labor force, but took jobs in other areas which often didn't pay as much, sometimes even less than the jobs they had originally left. Next, we'll focus on the theories of discrimination. The first being adverse treatment, which is a type of discrimination which the plaintiff attempts to show that employers actually treated the plaintiff differently than the majority of applicants or employees. An example of this would be if a female applicant is asked if she has any domestic responsibilities that could interfere with work, but a male applicant is not asked the same question. If this pattern were to continue, this could be adverse. Adverse impact is the type of discrimination that acknowledges that the employer may not have intended to discriminate against the plaintiff, but an employer practice did have an adverse impact on the group to which the plaintiff belongs. These cases are made by showing statistical differences between two groups in terms of their outcomes, hence why these cases are sometimes called statistical discrimination. Adverse impact can be demonstrated using the 80% or the 4/5 rule. This rule states that if it can be shown that a protected group received less than 80% of the desirable outcomes, such as promotion, raises, and so on, received by majority group, the plaintiff can claim to have met the burden of demonstrating adverse impact. Next, we'll focus on the factors for discrimination, starting with sex role spillover. Beliefs about appropriate roles of men and women are likely to spill over in a work setting, meaning expectations regarding female workers will be determined in part by our expectations and beliefs of women in general. The more cues that are in the environment that point to the worker's gender, the higher the likelihood that the women will be treated differently. These cues are often emphasized by sex roles, such as flirting or differences in dress code. Next is the stereotypes of people and jobs. There are different ways of describing jobs and people. Sometimes these fit better when applied to one gender over the other. Stereotypes of some traits may be positive for males while it is negative for women and vice versa. This can be said for jobs as well. An example would be a wanted ad asking for an aggressive salesperson, which would not be seen positively in an ad asking for an aggressive kindergarten teacher. Next is the lack of fit theory, which was developed by Madeline Hillman to identify the conditions under which gender discrimination might be more or less likely to occur. Hillman suggests that discrimination was most likely to occur when characteristics of the person do not fit with the stereotype of the job. Wage surveys suggest that a lack of fit is more of a serious issue for women than for men, more commonly anyway. Last is tokenism. Tokenism is defined as the individuals representing a particular group that accounts for less than 15% of an organization's members, though some studies suggest that token status isn't necessarily represented solely by a numerical representation. Tokenism increases awareness and scrutiny of a person's behavior, especially when the behavior confirms a stereotype. Token status can lead to polarization, which is an exaggeration of differences between members of a minority group and the members of the majority group. People tend to notice the differences and similarities between the tokens and the members of the majority. Next, we'll look at the results of discrimination. Here we have a number of occupations followed by the percentage that women are in that occupation, along with the median weekly earnings for both men and women and the differences there. Differences in earnings is in 2004, the women working a full-time job year-round earned 77% of what men earn, meaning that for every dollar a man made, a woman only made 77 cents. As the table had previously shown, this is sometimes more significant than the percent such as the physician, which is over 50%, just over 50% of what a man would have made. Here we're focusing on the labor force participation and the change from 1970 to 2005. By 2005, 60% of women and 73% of men were in the labor force. Since 1960, married women with children in the labor force have almost tripled. A large influence on this influx in women's position in the labor force is the growth in immigration the U.S. has witnessed in the recent years, which is about 75,000 legal immigrants each year, the largest rate of immigration since the 19th. Next, we'll focus on the promotions. The obstacle that women encounter at work have popularly become known as the glass ceiling. This phrase is meant to show the fact that even though most formal barriers of women's advancements have been removed, there are invisible mechanisms that prevent women from advancing. These mechanisms are invisible because they are built into the social structure of an organization, and they are not as obvious as formal restrictions and rules that would discriminate against. Many studies have shown that women are actually promoted more often than men, but these promotions are often lateral, meaning they're from one location in an occupational system to another of similar rank or status, whereas men's promotions are more likely to be vertical, where they would be promoted upwards of more importance. This is the case even when both have the same qualifications, such as education or previous experience. This difference is often due to the different entry-level positions in an organization, with the position of men entering being those that are more likely to lead to upward in the. Last, we have gender segregation in the labor force market is a significant influence on the women's class positions. This refers to the pattern whereby women and men are situated in different jobs throughout the labor force. It is a particular form of occupational distribution in terms of a term sociologists use to refer to the placement of workers in different occupations. These are my sources. Thank you for taking the time to view my presentation.